Hi everyone, my name is Matthew. I'm a classical pianist and translator, and in today's video I'd like to share with you some of my thoughts about a topic that I think has really been on the minds of anyone who has studied the piano at some point, and that's how to improve their technique. So before going into my thoughts on that specifically, I'd like to share with you a little story. In the summer of 2010, this was when I had finished my first year of the Bachelor's in Piano Performance and I was just beginning summer vacation, I thought I really want to improve my technique, and now I'm going to have this nice long summer vacation ahead of me. It's the perfect time to get something done, to achieve something by the start of the next semester, so I'd feel like I had sort of leveled up or improved and used the summer, productively. So what I did was I thought, okay, I'll choose a piece that I think I could manage in a few months, perhaps manage, one of the pieces that I actually chose was the Schiffer paraphrase of the Strauss Trish Trash or Chit Chat Polka. And I thought, it's short, it's difficult, but it's short, and it might be possible in a few months to at least get a somewhat decent handle on it, enough to improve my technique. The idea was to pick something that was above my level, short, manageable, and that would improve my technique if I sort of raised myself to the level of this piece. Well, long story short, I actually didn't end up learning the piece. I don't think I really worked on it at all, to be honest. And I'm not really sure why that is, but as far as specifically what got in the way schedule-wise or whatever, I don't remember even starting to work on it, to be honest. I might have read through it once or twice, but actually I think it's a very good thing that I didn't learn at the time. And I will explain why later on in the video, and in fact it's directly related to the topic of this video. So now fast forward about 10 years, and at this time I had decided I'd been working in translation, and I still work in translation actually, that's my main job, but I'm also a pianist as well, and I decided finally after all those years that I would start a master's degree in piano performance. And because of COVID and, the world was just all messed up, so, nothing went according to schedule, so it turned out that I had about a year before I was going to start my very first semester of the master's. So I thought, okay, I'm kind of in a similar situation to what I was 10 years ago. I have this time and I want to use it well, and I would actually like to improve my technique and fill in some of the gaps that I always knew were there, but I think I could sort of get away well enough despite the gaps that I never really felt the seriousness of going back to basics and fixing these problems. But this time around I thought, if I don't do this now, when am I going to do it? Really, I have a year of time that I can try out ideas and experiment and try to find solutions to these things, so that when I start the master's, I'll be in that much of a better position to then kind of work from a higher level. So instead of having to learn the basics during the master's, I would have already, presumably, if this plan went well, I would have learned all these basics, and then when I start the master's, you can sort of get right down to the interesting things, the more musical questions, and not have to worry so much about the technical, nitty-gritty mechanical things. And so that's what I did. But this time around, what I decided to do was, instead of picking some piece that was very difficult and that I thought would raise my technique to its level, something that I'd always, I think, interested me in a sort of casual way that I had heard of before, was this idea of biomechanics. So applying basic knowledge of anatomy and physics to the piano. So in other words, I guess you could say a bit more of a science-based approach. And so I had been kind of curious about this for a long time. And so I thought, instead of choosing the old approach, which, not that I really did it seriously, but I in the meantime, I had learned other pieces that were challenging. But still, if there were any passages where there was something more repetitive that I had to do for a while, I would get tense. So I realized that whatever I had been doing, it wasn't really resolving the fundamental issue. So this time around, what I decided to do was I did a bit of research, and I found some books like What Every Pianist Needs to Know About the Body. Also György Sándor's book on piano playing, that's the title of the book. So I took some of these books that apply more of in the case of the former book, definitely more of a kind of anatomy and science-based approach. And in the case of the latter, still, I guess, kind of scientific way of thinking. Now, when I think about that book, I consider it more of almost like a kind of an engineering way of thinking. So dividing up the problem into certain, manageable, smaller categories, and then systematically applying that to different technical issues, different difficulties that come up in the course of music. But the point is that I didn't rush into it with a piece that, I thought would raise my technique in itself. So in other words, I didn't expect a certain piece to do that for me. I realized that I have to fix my technical problems first, and then I can apply that to other pieces. So my way of thinking kind of did a 180 in those intervening 10 years. And this time around, what I decided to do was I would still choose a piece. In my case, I chose the Black Key Etude by Chopin, and I would work on this piece. I would use this piece, again, not expecting that the piece in itself would somehow miraculously solve my technical problems, but that I would apply concepts I was learning from these other sources, these resources, and I would use that piece to test them out. And so that's what I did. Basically, for a month and a half, I think, I really only worked on the Black Key Etude. And to give a little bit of context, the reason why I chose the Black Key Etude is because it is short. It's very short, about a minute and a half. And it's a piece that, for whatever reason, there wasn't any part in the piece, any bar that gave me trouble. I could always play any passage of the piece without any problem. But the thing is, when I would try to put the whole thing together, even though it's just a minute and a half, for some reason I would always be quite tense by the end of it. And it would drive me nuts. I thought, what is with this piece? Why can't I seem to get through this without any tension? And so I thought, this is the perfect piece, actually, because it's short, it's manageable, and I can measure the progress of my results independently. Because again, keep in mind, I hadn't started the masters yet. So I needed a piece where I could measure my own progress independently. I didn't have a teacher for those 10 years. And so for a month and a half, as I said, I just worked on the Black Key Etude. Every day, after doing some reading and research, I would find out about some new concepts about how to use the elbows, the wrists, the fingers, which joint to move the thumb from, all these things, the shoulders, the back, how to sit even. So all these different things, not all in one day, but I would read a bit each day, and I would try out new ideas. And it's funny, every day I would think that, okay, I think I've got it now. I'd work on the piece and I'd think, wow, I've definitely made progress. And I think after some days especially, I think this is it. I think I've solved it. I think I've got all the pieces of the puzzle done, finished. And I would come back the next day and it was like 10 times worse than the day before. It wasn't even at the baseline level where I'd started the day before. It was like somehow I got 10 times tenser and tighter since the day before. And you can all imagine what that does psychologically. I mean, you just want to give up, right? And there were quite a few times in that month and a half where really I was just so discouraged. I thought, what is wrong with me? Why can't I figure this out? But there is a happy ending to the story. Eventually I did figure it out, or at least I figured out, I would say, about 95% of the puzzle on my own. Again, on my own, of course, we always, even when we say we learn something on our own, we have the help of, books and tutorials online and things. So it's, bearing in mind, that is what I mean. I don't mean to sound like I didn't have any outside help or information coming in at all. Of course, I'm forever indebted to those books especially. And to various, I read dozens. Those are just the two that stick out to me and that I would recommend to anyone who's also interested in improving their technique. But I read literally dozens and dozens of books and dissertations and articles, and to a lesser extent used YouTube. To be honest, mostly I was using books and dissertations. But really, I went through a lot of materials. I was trying out all kinds of ideas. And eventually, over the course of a month and a half, after just working on this one little piece that was giving me trouble, a very particular kind of trouble, tension, I did find that I got to the point where, as I said, I probably improved about 95% in the piece. And it's never 100%, as all of you know. There's always still room to grow, and there's always more work to do. But this gets back to the reason why I'm glad that I didn't just kind of rush in head first and start learning that Chifra piece 10 years before. So what I advise to you all is that, and this is again just my 2 cents, you can go about this however you want to, but what I found worked was to approach the problem really from a fundamental point of view. So in other words, to really strike at the heart of the problem. And it's not necessarily fun. That month and a half with just a minute and a half piece, that for me, that was brutal. That really took a lot of patience. And I haven't worked on such a short piece exclusively for such a long time, I don't think in my life, to be honest. And I think for a lot of people, that's probably the case. We always have at least a couple of, even if it's 2 pieces or 3 pieces, even little pieces, I feel like most of the time we do have something else going on in parallel. So for me, that was intense, to do just that one little piece. But I hope that the point of today's video, it's clear that it's not that, to improve your technique, you should learn the Blackie Etude by Chopin. I think that you can improve your technique with absolutely any piece. And in fact, there's a quote from, I'm pretty sure it's Busoni, Ferruccio Busoni, where he said that basically you should treat every piece. It doesn't matter whether it's a sonatina for children or it's a transcendental etude or whatever it is, treat it as a virtuoso piece. And basically you'll find that every piece is challenging. There's no such thing really as an easy piece if you really hold yourself to the highest standard possible. And so I hope that the takeaway message from today's video is that if you are struggling with tension or if there are just other technical issues you want to resolve, I would recommend not, for instance, just going right away for doing some Hanon or Czerny etudes or whatever. The point is that you can improve your technique with any piece that you're learning right now. It's just how you go about it. And I would highly recommend approaching it from the perspective of going right back to basics and trying to understand first your own body and how that interacts in a safe and ergonomic and healthy way, how it interacts with the piano, because that, I think, is what will enable you to play for many years without injury, without tension, without any kind of discomfort or pain. Any of those things are symptoms of a problem. And the problem will not go away by just choosing a more difficult piece and trying to iron out the difficulties that way. And if I had, let's say, learned that Cifra piece, all I would have done is learned a more difficult piece in an imperfect way. My technique would have still been just as imperfect as it was, and still is. As I said, it's always a work in progress, but I've definitely made a lot of improvements since then. And I think it's because I took that time to really step back and to have the patience. Wasn't easy, but to have the patience to undergo that process of learning a lot more about the craft of piano playing and what that involves. And I've found that my problem-solving abilities at the piano have really increased significantly as a result, because I recognize the underlying principles behind why certain solutions to different problems work and why others don't, and also why I was having tension. And if even now, if there's a certain piece that has a certain technique, like say tremolos or something that's very, very kind of dense and repetitive, there's still times when, maybe because I didn't learn that technique when I was very young and didn't learn it properly from the beginning, I still have to really be conscious and aware when I do something like a tremolo. But at least I know if there is any tension, I do know what the problem is, and I can kind of, using deduction, I can kind of narrow down which part, is too tense or whatever, whether it's my wrist or my, a certain finger joint or my arm or whatever it might be. But basically, I do recommend approaching it from this much more fundamental point of view, instead of expecting a certain piece or a type of piece, an etude or something, to solve the problem in itself. So the main takeaway from today's video, I think, is if you have a technical problem, if there's a certain gap in your technique, that gap will still be there, whether you're playing a Clementi sonatina or you're playing the Liszt sonata. It will still be there. So really attack the problem itself at its core. So anyway, I hope that gives you all some food for thought, if it's something that, maybe hadn't occurred to you before. I know I wish I had thought of this stuff, or that somebody had told me about 15 or, even 20 years ago. But we all figure things out at our own pace, and that's okay. And we come to different ideas in our own way. And I came to it in my own way, using books and things, and on my own before I had started the Masters. And of course, during the Masters, I owe my professor a great deal, because she really helped me to solidify a lot of the ideas that I had learned during that period of independent study and research that I did. But I don't think I would have made as much progress if I hadn't gone through that period on my own. As I said, when I had gone into the Masters, I probably would have had to start from a much more basic level, and in a way would have wasted some of that time, because it was stuff that I could have done on my own. And so I'm glad I did that. I'm glad I went through that process. So again, I hope that today's video is helpful. If this is something you've been struggling with, feel free to leave a comment if you have any thoughts about this, or if you have any questions. I'll leave links, or at least the titles, to some of the things that I mentioned in this video, and any other resources that I think might be helpful to you. So happy practicing. Good luck on your own journeys with improving your piano technique, and I'll see you all in the next video. Thanks for watching.